Hey Now! It's the Hey Now Howard podcast, brand new for 2020, coming at you from Los Angeles, California. My name is Daniel Coyne.
And I'm Tyler Cortad. Today we're going to be talking about Howard in quarantine.
This is Beto. He's as bad as can. He knows he's the best. This is Beto. He's as bad as can. He knows he's the best.
Welcome back, everybody. I was just thinking, did we not record an entire podcast in 2020? I mean, I know 2020 has been very, very weird, but did we really go this long without recording a single podcast? It's now June.
I mean, I think 2020 has been pretty awesome. I don't know what the big deal is.
That's true. I don't even know what I was thinking. But no, it's June. Dude, did we not fucking do one?
Nah, just kidding. Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, our fans have been clamoring, just flooding our inboxes,
Yeah, you
knocking
know what?
on our streets.
The fact that this didn't take off like I thought it
Yeah,
was,
knock on
I was just like, you know what? Fuck this podcast. Nah, I still listen to the Stern Show. Daniel is too, so we're still in it. We're still hanging on by a thread here.
We're still with you guys.
We're still with you guys, and we figured now's a better time, or as good as time as ever, to record a new podcast. So here we are, and it's a weird time for the Stern Show. It's a weird time for the world, but staying in our world of the Stern Show, it's fucking weird, man. And Howard being in quarantine, and the show being in quarantine, as well as all the staff. It's interesting. Today we're going to be talking about that. But before we dive into all that, just a little about us. Daniel and I both live in Los Angeles. It's a weird time here as well, just with obviously the protests and everything like that. But we're staying safe. We're keeping at it. Daniel's back to work. I'm starting to get back to work, and
Yeah, it's kind of tough to not see my best buddy Tyler here for a couple months, but we were kind of told that we'd all die if we see anybody besides our own reflection in the mirror, so it's kind of tough to record anything with friends over the past couple months. we thought about, we kind of talked about this, we thought about doing like a call-in version, but I mean, we can't even figure out how to make the audio good regularly.
Yeah, I know. We're doing this now without even mics. We're idiots. We're so stupid. Like, I bought a new computer, and I don't even know how to... it doesn't have a USB jack to plug in our microphones, so we're just literally talking into a laptop screen right now. So
Yeah, I came over with my microphone ready to go, but Tyler has upgraded his computer, and with new technology...
But you can't upgrade your brain, so... Still stupid. So we're going to figure this out, and we'll power right through. Powering through.
Yeah, we've never been the best audio podcast in the world, but we're working on it. We'll get like a Scott the engineer eventually.
Remember him?
I think he's available for work, in fact.
What happened to that dude? That's for a later podcast when we talk about people that have fallen off the face of the Stern Show and never to be heard from again.
Yeah, so also we're kind of brainstorming on some topics to cover over the following months. We're going to do a watch-along episode of Private Parts, so set your reminders for that. We'll start Private Parts at the same time as you guys and just walk through the film, just talk about whatever comes to mind as we're watching it. Also have some show ideas about like the dark side of the show. Essentially, we want to bring you topics that you won't hear on the show, you won't hear on the wrap-up show. But we're fans. We still love the show, but we also we're also willing to criticize a little bit too.
Yeah, we'll preface everything by saying we are fans of the show. We love Howard, but I know some of the things we're going to talk about may seem contrary to that idea. But I assure you now that we still are fans. We still love the show. But that's not to say that there aren't some things that aggravate the shit out of us about the show.
Right. I feel like if we get to, like, we're both Steeler fans, for instance. If we get together, we could talk about, oh man, the Steelers are doing this. We wish they'd, switch up their strategy, this, that, and the other thing. We get into depth about what we don't like. But if we're in a group of like Patriots fans, then we love the Steelers. So you gotta, when we're with each other here as a Stern Show family, we can criticize the show, but on the outside, we gotta stay true to our man, the king.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. We're all on the same team here, but it doesn't mean we can't criticize the coach and all the players and the organization and everything that goes along with it.
Yeah.
But we still love you. We still
Tough
love you. But bringing us to today, I guess the most obvious thing to talk about is the fact that the show has been done from everybody's homes. Howard's home, Rob and Fred, everybody's at home. Everybody's doing the show from their basements, from their houses, their small apartments, whatever level of income they're at. Obviously, there's some disparity there, but it's been an interesting way to do the show. It took me a couple episodes of the show to kind of get into the groove of it, because it's very different than them being in the studio. You can tell almost right off the bat, especially when they first started doing the show from home. They did it via Zoom, and are they still doing it? Before they got the feed in there for Sirius, they started doing it through Zoom, and it was just patchy as hell. It was
the first
terrible.
week or so was real bad.
Yeah, it was rough, man. And it's like you couldn't. It's hard to really get into bits and comedy things, and it's just even their topics of discussion that were, even whether they were serious or funny, it was hard to get into just because it was so terrible, the audio, much like you're hearing now. The audio was that
as
bad.
we speak about terrible audio.
Yeah, we're experts on audio, but yeah, I mean that was rough. But I think they've kind of fell into more of a groove. But yeah, those first couple of weeks were rough.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and also it was a while now. It seems like a year ago this whole Corona started, but if you remember back, the Stern Show actually didn't exactly have a smooth transition into this, because they didn't really have any announcements that the show is going to continue. If you remember, that was right as things were kind of getting canceled, like as developments were happening. Like there was an NBA game where the players just like walked off the court during a game once they found out that it was either one of the teammates or someone in the NBA had it. So it was like a 2-week span there that no one knew what was going on, including the doctors and the leaders and all that. So everyone was kind of scrambling. And the Stern Show, I think they did a Monday, Tuesday, and then not a Wednesday, but no announcement.
And then the week off all of the next week, right? And
so
then
no social media posting,
right.
No like, hey, we're adjusting, we'll be back with you soon. And then all of a sudden, like all these podcasts started coming out with like quarantine version, and you saw some quick adjustments, and the Stern Show was a bit behind there. I mean, now it's fine.
I remember you were saying, like, Daniel thought, he's like, I think they're done. He's like, I think that it's done. I think the show's done. I think Howard's like, I'm out. Like, and I almost believed for a second. I was like, nah, they can't go out like that and just be like completely done. I feel like, I mean, I didn't think it was going to be this long of a process, anyways, as far as Corona and get everything situated. So, but yeah, whenever you said that, I was like, damn, maybe he's right. I was like, maybe he's just kind of out with it.
Yeah, I kind of figured that he'd do something, but I did say back then that he'll never return back to the New York City studio, and I still hold to that. And now it's like, 3 months into the quarantine, I don't think he's ever going to do a show from the New York City studio again. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting because whenever Jerry Seinfeld was on the show 2 weeks ago, I think now, and when he was on, they talked about this thing where they got on the phone and Jerry gave Howard advice about what to do with his career, as far as if he should re-sign with Sirius, if he should retire, if he should go to a different platform. And Howard said that they came to a conclusion that Howard was going to do something. He didn't say what the decision was, but he said it. And I assumed, just kind of like, I was like, I think he's going to re-sign for a certain amount of time, or he's going to do something. I don't think he was just going to disappear at that moment. But I think that this has changed everything. I think that this whole thing has like kind of changed whatever plan that he had then. I think this changed everything. Do I think he's going to return to New York in the same fashion that he was at that studio at Sirius? I don't think so. No, I don't. I think that he's, just judging by the way he's handling the pandemic now with masks, and we'll get into that, how he's completely obsessed with masks and people wearing masks. But how he is, with that, I just can't see him coming back to the studio and being normal,
Yeah, and within the past couple weeks, if you kind of read between the lines, he'll say stuff like, oh, I got a whole crew coming in this weekend with hazmat suits, and they're going to upgrade my home studio. So, I mean, I don't think he's doing that if he thinks he's going to be there for another month and then he's back in the studio. Yeah, I think he's planning this will be his kind of swan song.
Yeah. Now, here's a question, though. It's like, now, there was already a debate, and Daniel and I would always get in these debates, too. He's like, where he would think the show was already a little watered down from what it used to be back in the heyday of the Stern Show. 90s, even early 2000s with Artie, and that was kind of like where the show was hitting its peak. I was loving the show. Even up 5-6 years ago, or I'm sorry, even 7-8 years ago up until now. I was into the show, and I was kind of into the bits that they were doing. But is this version at home even more so watered down? Like, I didn't think it was at first, but now that they're at home, is this version way too watered down for you as far as the bits that they can do, the limits that they have, with the staff, and and just being, just kind of a lack of comedy that what the show was originally built on. If they stay at home, does that kind of ruin it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but I listen to the show now, and it's kind of Robin and Howard talking. Like, there's not overly amount of structure to it.
Which is what, like, a lot of people love about the show. Like,
Right.
There's some people that's what they like. Just Howard and Robin bullshitting is what they listen. That was what they tune in for.
Yeah. I guess one thing that I notice about the show is that it doesn't provide much escapism, especially during this coronavirus. I mean, this has been something that it's something that you can't escape the topic. Everyone's talking about wherever you go. But normally when you tune into whatever it is, a TV show, movie, a podcast, you kind of want to just kind of escape for an hour, just kind of not. And of course they're going to still talk about it, but like Howard he goes hard on the topic. And it's just like, when you're already kind of stressed about it, yeah, you can take it for 5, 10, 15 minutes, but when you're an hour and a half into it and he's still going on about like people not wearing masks, you just kind of like, you kind of just lose the energy of it.
Right. Dude, Howard's OCD. It's like, that's a very known thing. And like, Howard is just completely OCD about germs, germaphobe, the whole deal. This couldn't happen to a worse person right now. You know what I mean? Like, so like already, like, I'm like, because I don't share that at all. Like, I am not a germaphobe. I do not think about...
I've seen you eat lots of food off the floor.
I eat food. I'm a fucking disgusting human being. Like, I don't give a shit. Like,
David Hasselhoff style.
And oh, you've seen that? Yeah, Hasselhoff eating the fucking Carl's Jr. right off the kitchen floor. But I just don't get sick. Like, I don't think about it. Like, if I was getting sick a lot, or if I had, I don't know. I just don't think about that kind of stuff much until now. But Howard does, and Howard's obviously completely OCD about this stuff. So, having said that, like, it's just, I don't know. I don't share the same. I understand that this is a very serious pandemic. I'm not trying to downplay that at all. I'm just saying that the way he handles it and the way I would handle it are completely different. So, just hearing that over and over again, and that being hammered over, like, as far as, people aren't wearing masks. They're not wearing masks. They're not wearing masks. It's getting so repetitive, and it's making me want to pull my hair out. I mean, just the world, on its own, doesn't make me want to pull my hair out. Hearing that for an hour and a half, it's like, you're right. There's no escapism from it.
Right. And normally when it's a normal day and you're at work and you're like half paying attention, listening to the show, and Howard's talking about the germs and we're all going to die, it doesn't have as much impact. But when you're listening and you're kind of scared and like maybe you lost your job and things are going weird and like you're worried about your family getting sick, and let me just take a walk around the neighborhood and just listen to the Stern Show for an hour, and then you just hear about we're all going to die for an hour. Like, it's just, there's just nowhere to go.
Which, like, that we're all going to die attitude is not something that I share about the coronavirus. You know what I mean? Like, and that's, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, like, because I'm also I'm an idiot. What do I know?
We made it this far.
Yeah, we made it this far, and so, and I'm an idiot. So I could be completely wrong. But I'm just saying, like, I don't share that, that pessimistic view of we're all going to die. We all need to stay in our homes or wear a mask at all times, or this is over. I just, not to get like into the, COVID shit, but I just remember when it came out, it was, Fauci said, we're all probably going to get this eventually. We all just don't want to get it at once to overwhelm the hospital systems. So I took that. I was like, okay, great. So for 2 months, I didn't see Dan for 3 months. We quarantined. I I didn't go out unless I had to, and if I did, I wore a mask and the whole deal. Like I did all that, and so, but now that I just think everything kind of changed, where there's still some people who are just like, no, if you go outside, you're gonna die attitude, and I just don't. I'm not. I can't get on board with that, and I think that's where Howard kind of lays on the spectrum of how people, feel about this whole thing.
Yeah. And I'll give him credit. He is in New York City, and that was definitely the worst part of the country. So if you are, and like I think Sal's parents got it, and I think didn't Gary have a family member die? Like his brother-in-law died, or his father-in-law died.
Yeah, and it was like, and trust me, I'm
some
not
serious shit.
Of course, and I'm not downplaying any of that. Of course,
yes, you were.
Yeah, fuck off, fuck off. This is canceled. Don't cancel me on their own podcast.
This podcast is canceled.
Hashtag cancel Hey Now Howard podcast. Damn it!
Just when we got starting to get big. God damn
this is our
it!
moment.
Took us down. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go on.
No, I mean, obviously, there's some horrific stories, and and people are going through some serious shit with this. I'm just saying, as far as where Howard lies on the spectrum of how he goes about his day to day, and where a lot of people are at, it's just very different.
Yeah, and I hate to use this term; it's a little bit played out, but Howard's almost doing a little bit of virtue signaling. Where he's kind of like,
what does that mean? Virtue signaling? What?
But you know what I mean, though?
No.
It goes towards this whole cancel culture of whatever I'm telling you is the best, and if you say it's wrong, then you're in the wrong, because the thing I just learned about 3 days ago is now the most important thing in the world. So if you don't agree, then you're against us. It's like you're signaling your virtues of it. It's right to wear. It's right to do this. And if you're not doing it, then you're wrong. Right. Even though we just decided that 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of that, and I think when callers are just listening to this and they're calling from the middle of the country that really hasn't been affected that much, it is a little bit of I don't know, elitism or something. It's just kind of like Howard's kind of in his ivory tower of just well,
Howard's in a bubble. He's always lived in a bubble.
Right. So it's kind of easy for him to say
right.
Yeah, Howard's not laid off. He didn't lose his job. So when your biggest struggle in life is your wife cleaning your apartment for 3 months, it's a little bit tough to connect to the average person, and especially during a time of crisis.
Right.
We don't feel even I hate to always bring him up, but Joe Rogan, super successful, super rich, super everything. But when you hear him speak, he's kind of he's an everyday guy. He's you kind of feel like he's in the struggle with you. He's kind of you don't get the feeling that he's in the Hamptons and oh my God, I haven't seen anyone in 3 months, and I won't let my wife go to a party, and
right.
Can you believe my wife mop the floors again? It's kind of it comes off a little elitist.
Yeah, and Howard's usually pretty conscious of that, because he doesn't.
He used to be very conscious.
Yeah,
I feel the past couple of years that's gone out the window.
Yeah,
he really doesn't give a fuck to show his I think he really fought that at first when people kind of started catching on to it of you just want to hang out with celebrities, and he get real offended. Now he just kind of goes with it.
Right.
Oh yeah, I hung out with Jennifer Aniston this weekend, and yeah, David Letterman and Jerry Seinfeld. We went out to dinner, and that was kind of his whole shtick of I'm the outsider of this crowd making fun of them.
Right.
Now he kind of has zero qualms about letting you know that he's a part of them.
Right.
I'm broadcasting from the Hamptons, and my number one worry is my wife can't stop cleaning the house.
Is that where he is in the Hamptons?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did he talk about that? Because I actually didn't know that. I thought he was. I don't know where. I thought he had a house somewhere else.
No, that's the Hamptons. Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of tough for the truck driver who just got laid off in Minnesota. It's a bad example because of what's going on, but just some random fucking place
Canceled again. Twice in 20 minutes.
Oh, the Twitter trolls are gonna be so after
Minnesota. Us. You had to go to Minnesota.
Of all
the places, all the states.
Oh my God, I'm a terrible person.
Jeez, God, how
you know it's funny that we're joking about, but I wonder, this whole cancel culture thing. It really hasn't touched Howard. Is that because he's on his own? And I'm kind of going off topic here, but is that because he's on kind of a paid subscription of he is a little bit still immune to just saying some wacky shit without the Twitter trolls coming after. I mean, throughout his career, he's had activist groups and things trying, but you really don't hear a lot of that. Like,
No.
Or just
Well,
people
it's either
not
that
care.
or people don't listen anymore, and that's kind of like that could be a topic for another day. But like, are people just not listening to Howard like they used to? I mean, Howard will make some headlines whenever he does a good interview, and the interviewee will say something that he's never said before, or something, kind of something quotable, and news outlets will pick up on it. So like you'll see, Howard in the news that way. But I mean, well, I will say that I did see Howard trending with that Don Jr. exchange whenever he kind of like called him out. They called each other out on Twitter.
Yep. So that happened during quarantine. We might as well get into it.
Right, that happened. And he also, and on top of that, he also got it. Whenever he did say a couple things that were like, I guess, considered controversial. But again, in today's day and age, it's kind of hard. You got to say some pretty wacky fucking shit to really have some staying power in the news, because things change at the, a drop of a hat. So, but he did say something about, I hope, I'm not going to quote him, but it was like something about he hopes all the Trump supporters take drink bleach and go kill themselves, that sort of thing. Like that made some headlines.
He essentially said, like, if you follow him so well and like if you
go
believe
do it.
everything he says, then just go huff the bleach and see what happens, and
go do
you
it.
all die together. Yeah.
So that I remember that making some headlines. So he's definitely been in the news, but again, I can't
But
tell. If it's,
sorry to cut you off, but that in particular, that drew the attention of Trump's son. Is it Don Jr. or Eric?
it was Don Jr.
Who cares? But one of them.
One of the psychos.
But he came out. I mean, he made some decent points if Howard actually still was trying to grow his audience. And he essentially compared Howard to, like, when Hillary Clinton got caught, calling Trump voters deplorable, I think was the word she used. So he essentially, Don Jr. was like, you better watch, because a lot of your audience you're directly talking to. It's kind of like when Michael Jordan said, like Republicans buy shoes too. So he never officially endorsed any Democratic politician that would want his endorsement, because he knew that the second you make a political statement, 50% of the audience is automatically against you. I mean, that's our society now.
Sure.
And so I think Howard's kind of played that. He's kind of walked that fine line, but we were kind of talking earlier. It's also interesting that Trump himself has shown no qualms about going after people, whether they be very famous or barely famous. I wouldn't be surprised if he tweets towards this podcast at the end. But that's how petty he can be.
Yeah.
But yet he's quote unquote friends, whatever you want to call it, with Howard, acquaintances, but never says a word about Howard on Twitter.
Right, and Howard's ripped into him for the last 2 months, I'd say. And it
pretty,
really is
pretty hard.
He's held. I would say he wouldn't agree with this if he were listening, but I would say that he's held back pretty, significantly up until the last 3-4 months, and especially since Corona hit, he's laid into Donald a lot, sometimes for a good hour and a half to 2 hours, relentlessly. And saying some shit that if anybody else said or mentioned Trump on Twitter Trump would respond to. And Trump has some ammunition to respond to Howard with, just kind of like how Don, and you wonder if the Don Jr. comments to Howard were, talked about with
the White
Trump,
House response.
The White House response, or if this was just Don Jr. on his own, who knows? But it's you would think that Trump would respond. I mean, if he responded to Jimmy Kimmel saying something, he's got to be hearing what Howard's saying too.
He 100% gets at least a briefing about he's being talked about.
Yeah, he's
a
mental
guy tweets
midget.
at SNL.
Yeah.
He tweets at the Oscars.
Right.
So that is interesting, though. I mean, is it that maybe he still considers him a quote unquote friend, or does he think that? What I kind of think of it too is Trump almost knows that. But then again, it's I'm treating Trump like he has a filter or half a brain, but he almost knows that if he does go after Howard hard, Howard has this 4-hour show 3 days a week that he could just totally lay into him, uncensored. So I'm wondering if he just wants to kind of let it die. Because
Yeah, I
ultimately,
wonder-
everyone's talking about the president, like every show.
Right.
And not a lot of it's positive.
No.
Unless you're watching Fox News.
But yeah, I wonder if he's that calculated about it. You know, I can't imagine that he's sitting there.
Trump?
He's like, yeah, I can't imagine he's sitting there. He's like, well, should I go after him? Should I not? I can't imagine that it's that calculated. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Or does
but-
he just have 7,000 other enemies to worry about? And
Right.
Howard's like,
Then it also
the list.
makes you gotta like wonder is I mean that's when I said that Trump has some ammunition, like he could talk about the numbers with Howard as far as like his listeners, his reach, you know, all that.
Yeah,
And
Don Jr. started bringing that up.
right.
Yeah.
So
Don
yeah.
Jr. basically said, it's not worth my time because this guy peaked in the 90s and no one really listens to him anyways.
I think that was, and backtracking what I said before, I think that was coming from more his dad than Don Jr. himself. I think that like that was a conversation. He's like, you know what?
What sounds like something his dad was saying.
Right, like you
The
go,
ratings
you,
suck.
Yeah, you handle that, and this way it doesn't come from me, and then he's out of it. But like Howard said earlier, though, on the show this week, you shouldn't give a shit. Who gives a shit? Like people would attack Bush, people attacked Obama. Like you didn't see them going after petty shit like that. They had other big things to worry
George
about.
Bush wasn't tweeting at Saturday Night Live
No.
doing impressions of
Yeah.
Will Ferrell doing an impression of
like
him.
making him look like the biggest idiot on the planet. Like,
But then he was like, "Oh, I'm the president."
right?
That's the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have to care what people on SNL do.
But that's not the world we live in right now, because we live in the fucking fantasy world.
For sure. But going back to the Stern show, I mean, one thing that just really bothers me is I don't give a fuck that Beth is cleaning the apartment for 3 months straight.
They act like that's the biggest, like the biggest thing that's happened in that household in years. Like, you know what? It freaks me out. Like, he made it a joke. He's like, you know, Beth cleaning. Like that was like the running joke that wasn't funny in the first
But
place.
was it a joke, though? I think he was serious.
He's serious because anytime she comes
like,
down,
he thinks that.
First
Like,
of all,
we relate to that.
I don't like get into like their marriage or anything, but like she's cried twice on air. Oh, Siri, not you.
Sorry, Tyler's iPhone Siri was trying to talk to us.
Not today. But dude, she's cried twice, like on air. It's kind of weird. Like, what? Do you,
Yeah.
like, she's like so stressed. I'm trying to think what she was crying about. Was that she was like stressed out, or whatever about cleaning and it was like the cats?
I
Like,
know. Even the one time it was kind of funny because like she was like she started crying and Howard's like, "What's wrong?" She's like, "I'm just so exhausted. I'm just exhausted." I mean, if you want to say mental exhaustion, I get it. We're all mentally exhausted, but it's just the focus on, oh my god, she's just cleaning the apartment.
right? Yeah.
And like,
but like,
congratulations.
what are you cleaning? Like, I get it's a huge apartment, but what's going on there that it's that dirty? Like, are they just that paranoid about Corona, so they need to clean it every day to make sure that there's no? I mean, because you can tell they're nuts. Like, they get a package that stays in the place for a week before they touch it. Like, if you look at all the research, the chances of getting Corona from that are like so insanely low. But I'm not getting like it's just insane that would be their reason for mental exhaustion that much, you know?
Yeah, I think it kind of ties back to the fact that Howard's just lost touch with the everyday man. Like, or just he either doesn't care or he doesn't have advisors kind of telling him, like, without getting a tangent, Tyler and I were just talking like off the air, like, why doesn't he have like the latest stand-up comics like Andrew Schultz, these guys? Like, I mean, I would
Chris D'Elia.
yeah, Chris D'Elia, like,
you know,
we could go on
anybody.
forever. Even
Right.
fucking Joey Diaz, he's not an up-and-comer, but like, have these guys that are crushing it at the Comedy Store, crushing it on all these comedy podcasts,
Right.
and they're fucking hilarious, dude. Have him in the studio for an hour, but he's just like,
He's so out of touch with
it's
that
like David
side of,
Spade.
yeah,
Like,
right.
it's like these comics from the 90s that, and I know there's like a Corona episode. We're going to get it further into like potential who he could be booking, but he just seems so goddamn out of touch that when it comes in times like this, it's like kind of highlighted.
Right, and I think you hit it on the head a little bit, where it's just a lack of people telling him that. I don't think he has anybody in his life, like, you know, he has nobody close to him telling him that. Yeah, he could listen to this, and he would just say, "Yeah, you guys are fucking idiots. You don't know. Like, what do you know? I've been in this business. You know, I made a lot of coin in this business." But, but you know, he has nobody in his inner circle telling him that he should be doing that, kind of reaching these younger comedians or booking these types of people on the show to kind of get a different audience. I I mean, you could say obviously like he's had younger musicians, and in like Harry Styles was a great interview and a great performance in the studio right before they broke.
Billie Eilish,
yeah, and Miley Eilish.
Say her name wrong.
Yeah,
Eilish,
Billie Eilish,
yeah.
Miley Cyrus. So he's had good young musicians on. I know that's more probably his focus, but when it comes to music, it's become more music and interviews and politics than it has comedians, and I feel like he lost a lot of that from. He used to have hilarious comedians on in the 90s and early 2000s that, especially when Artie was in the studio, that they would really make or break, not break, but really make a career. Really, somebody's career could honestly take off. I mean, case in point, he's had Amy Schumer on a million times, but whenever her first appearance was on, Judd Apatow listened to her, and that's how they came up with the movie Trainwreck.
Right.
I mean, that should be reason enough for Howard to be like kind of a little motivated to have some young comedians, some up and comers on. I don't know. I know it's a different episode, but it kind of like it's fucking aggravating.
Well, plus we love comedy. We live in the town of the Comedy Store, like the mecca of, like we're in an awesome era of stand-up comedy right now. And even if you just don't even want to do stand-ups, there's just so much comedy out there, and it's a comedy show.
Right.
It's almost like Howard doesn't want someone funnier than him on the show. You ever get that impression?
Yes. Yeah, but that's
because dude, Dave Chappelle was in the Artie or in the Jackie chair before Artie. Like they actually considered like there was a moment there. This is before the Chappelle show like really blew up, but there was a moment there that Chappelle could have been on the show long term. He could have been a staff member.
Right.
It's like he's always had that connection. Like he even had Dan Cook on when he was kind of coming up. I'm not saying that he's like the greatest, but at least he was kind of in touch with the rising comics at the time. Norm Macdonald's been on the show. Like Gilbert's a guy that's kind of been blackballed, but he was on the show forever. Artie's obviously a stand-up.
Well, dude, like
he's the guy that used to bang Robin. He was a stand-up.
Doug Stanhope?
No. I can't. I can picture his fucking that deep voice. We'll think of it.
Mention him in the comments.
Yeah, but he was yeah, exactly. But just, and not only that, but I think that the show would be beneficial of like, it doesn't always have to be an actor or a singer. Like, maybe once in a while have, I don't know, like when they did, they've had previous guests on that kind of were a little bit different. They had the guy that did like the painter that did the Facebook mural, and then he made millions on the stock. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
Like those interesting stories. Like I still remember that interview. That was 20 years ago, but it was interesting. It was like, I don't want to hear about how you got a boner on the set because you're in a because you're filming private parts. Like I get it. It's the same conversations with the actors. I know this is like way off a tangent, but I think it just goes back to the idea of like the show needs a refresh, or like they need like it's just the same old like it's like the 17th David Spade interview and the 47th like Amy Schumer interview, and like he's got his friends, but they just need to mix it up. They need some new blood in there.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking though they did have Tom Brady on during quarantine, which was very like
that was a good interview.
I thought that was great, and so I just think the consistency with those types of interviews would be, because it also, especially now with them all being in studio, not in studio, the lack of bits that they can do or they have been doing, maybe they just haven't figured out how to do it yet. So I kind of give them the benefit of the doubt with that, but. They haven't been really doing a lot of bits that have been funny at all. It's been rough. Like, dude, they did a Jerry Springer call, man. Like, and a Jerry Springer prank phone call to like a conservative radio show. I don't remember there being one joke, one funny thing about it. It was literally Jerry Springer calling and being like, "Hey, do you guys like Jerry Springer?" And they're like, "We don't care about Jerry Springer," which was naturally the answer to anybody saying.
99% of people say.
Yeah, to anybody asking that question. And that they kept it going on for like 3-4 minutes, and it just wasn't funny. But like that's the only comedy bit that I could think of that they've tried to do since like they kind of went into that. I'm sure there's more, but I that's the one thing that's standing out, and it wasn't funny at all. What I'm saying is though, if they can just fill that time with more fascinating interviews. I know the interviews aren't going to be as compelling because it's weird with through Skype or Zoom, whatever you're using to do the interview. But to fill that time makes the world of difference. I thought the Sean Penn one that they did this week was fascinating. Not that it wasn't the best interview by any means, because they couldn't get into a lot of stuff because it was very detail oriented about what he wanted to talk about. But at least it was just a change of pace from the shitty, monotonous comedy bits that are not being produced while they're not in studio.
Yeah. And I mean, I know nothing about booking talent and doing PR and things like that, but I would almost imagine that this could end up being a benefit, because now you opened yourself up to, you don't have to be in New York to be interviewed or on a press tour. I mean, they're probably going to be promoting something if they're going to be on the show, but it's like, now maybe if you look at the glass half full, now maybe you open yourself up to anyone across the country can do a Zoom interview at any time instead of having to be in Manhattan.
To that point, though, so the 3 shows they did in Los Angeles, I thought were the best 3 shows that I've heard in years. I thought I loved them, and it was interview focused. Interview is essential for those 3 shows. But like you said, not all of them had anything to promote. Actually, most of them didn't have anything to promote. So if that could be the focus, and just having some people to interview that don't necessarily have something just to promote, but it kind of opens you up to talking to people that aren't just in New York. They could be in LA or anywhere else in the country or the world, and you can kind of talk to them without having an agenda.
Almost like the idea of a podcast.
What? A podcast?
And that's kind of what else I think too, is Howard also being drowned out by a million podcasts now?
Yes.
And all right, quick game. Okay, next question.
Next question. Yes, is the answer.
But I mean, 10, 15, 20 years ago, there's a couple people to listen to that were pretty funny. Even there wasn't even that many comedy, especially uncensored comedy, long form interview comedy. Now, fuck.
Yeah, take your pick.
There's
man.
hundreds. And I mean, I know Howard's a great interviewer, but you could listen to some podcasts and get some pretty good interviews out of the other ones.
Right.
And we were even watching, just before we started this, we were watching The Fighter and the Kid, and Andrew Schultz was on there. And we even commented, it's kind of cool to just kind of sit back in the recliner and just kind of bullshit. And they kind of let their talent seep through in that form. And now it's just such a popular and accessible form. And I think that's definitely a reason that touches a nerve when people compare Howard to podcasts. I think that he definitely sees himself, and rightfully so. I mean, the guy's unbelievably successful compared to,
and think of what he had to go through to get to where he is, and all the people that went. But the difference is the comedians that have an established base can do a podcast and have that base because of what they built and what they worked for with their stand-up comedy. And Howard's got to respect the fact that although they didn't do it in radio, they still did it in stand-up comedy, and that's kind of where they got their base, and that's why they have a successful podcast. And Howard's very similar in the sense that he worked his ass off in terrestrial radio, worked his way up, and now he's where he's at. So it's very similar trajectories, for what they both had to do. But Howard just seems to very much downplay podcasts and how relevant they are. But probably because of his ego, and he doesn't want to, admit the fact that podcasts are beating the shit out of Sirius right now.
Oh yeah, I mean we're gonna do a whole episode called Howard by the Numbers, but if you compare to Howard to not even Joe Rogan's of the world or these hugely popular shows, you can find some pretty C-list celebrities that have the same following as Howard online and the same reach. And that also has to do with him being on a paid service. But also I think when Howard discredits podcasts, when people call in and he says, oh, the only reason people listen to him is, Joe Rogan, he was an actor before, these comedians that have a base before they start their show, that still doesn't address the underlying fact that it's pretty quality show, or it's pretty quality content still.
Right.
So, yeah, I get it. They may have been famous from something else, but I can still listen to them for an hour and a half and talk to other comedians, talk to authors, and I always come back to Joe Rogan, but he does a great job of, he talked to like the guy that like joined the KKK, the black guy who like negotiated with the KKK.
The Black Klansman movie, what that was about? That same guy?
I'm not sure if it was about him. I know they did documentaries about it. I know it's talking about the Spike Lee movie.
Yeah.
But, you know, he just has these philosophers on, or like scientists, and then he'll throw some actors and singers in there too, but you just kind of need that a little bit to, like, you know, it just kind of gets monotonous of just hearing, like, because ultimately I'm also kind of like jaded, but sometimes I don't want to always hear about like celebrities' lives, or like, I kind of get it, it's a preview into there, but sometimes you want to hear some interesting people that like did something different, or you know.
But I think that's, you know, I don't know if that's Howard's bag, man. Like, because you think about it, like, when does a show ever really? I mean, you mentioned a couple of them that he's interviewed that, but that's not really the show, you know? I mean, that's what you go to podcasts for. That's what you listen to Rogan for, to hear about those interesting stories, interesting people.
Right.
Howard's going to do that, but he's going to do it with the fucking whack pack. You're going to hear about Bigfoot and, you know, Wendy the Slow Adult.
No, that I love.
Yeah, but I'm just saying.
But
like,
I just think his roster of talent is a bit dated.
Yeah.
That he, like, his Rolodex of talent.
Right. You're saying the
guests.
Of guests, yeah.
Yeah, of guests.
Right. No, I can agree with that, but I think that like what he supplements, you know, with those guests, you know, what you were talking about is his version of that is talking to the whack pack, is his talking to underdog lady, and like that's my interest, that's my version of, you know, your expose of an interesting person that did something out of the ordinary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Wendy shit her pants.
Yeah, Wendy. Like exactly. Like Wendy.
It's the most interesting.
But
no, I totally agree. I love that, and honestly, that's what, to me, keeps me coming back, because now we have a lot of other options if I want to hear a celebrity get interviewed. But that brings up an interesting point that I was also going to mention is the show able to grow in its current state? Let's say Howard never goes back to New York and he just does the show how it is now. Of course, we'll have a couple little growth characters here and there, but like, they're still banking on the whack pack, or, you know, like, is this an environment to find new whack packers, to find new audience, like even find a new audience to reach? Like, every caller seems like, hey, Howard, I've been listening for 30 years, or like, you know, it just kind of just seems the same shit.
Right. And every caller agree, 90% of the callers agree wholeheartedly with Howard and just literally piggyback off of any topic that he started talking about before. Then he picks up on that 10% that he'll hang up on, and 5 seconds calls him an idiot. Right. It's just like that same. There's no dialogue between the two of them that is anything interesting between either side, whether they agree with him or disagree with him. There's really no like genuine, you know, real conflict or dialogue that is interesting to listen to. But the answer, like to go off of what you were talking about, is this show going to grow in the current state? No.
Don't leave us in suspense like that.
No. You know, I don't know. It makes me nervous that we talked about Howard being out of touch a little bit, and I just think that Howard's already a recluse. He talks about it. He's a shut-in. He doesn't like to go out. He doesn't like to. But him being like this and being like, and he says it probably kind of half-heartedly, but like now he's legit shut in, recluse, not going out of his place. I think he's become even more out of touch. And the more that the show stays like this, the more I fear that the show will be out of touch. And what I mean by that is, like, I don't know, just, you know, how Howard's literally not stopped talking about fucking masks for 3 weeks now.
So for context, everyone else has stopped. Like, by the time you're listening to this, Corona hopefully is over. But as we're recording it, we're like 3 or 4 weeks away from everyone used to talk about masks. And maybe it still deserves to be talked about, but 99% of society have moved on to other topics. Yeah. Howard's still fighting that war.
Still fighting the war on masks, man. Like, it's like, you know, Beth and I were walking. Some guy jogged right up next to me. No mask. I'm like, dude, same story.
Beth holds her breath. She thinks that'll do it.
It's like, all right, now we live in LA. I'll say, like, I go for runs out here, and I'll probably out myself by saying it, but, like, I don't wear a mask when I'm running. I'll wear a mask every time I go into the store.
How dare you?
I know. Fuck me, right? Cancel me. I've already been canceled twice so far. But no, I'm not wearing a mask when I go for a run. But I will, obviously, like, I will move to the other side of the street to avoid somebody if I need to. Like, I'm not trying to make anybody feel uncomfortable, but I'm also, like, I'm just not wearing a mask outside. But I would say... It's probably split 50-50 of about the people that are wearing masks outside just on a walk in the park to not wearing masks. And indoors, everybody's required, of course. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about outdoors in a park or, like, you know, on a trail somewhere. But that's what Howard's talking about, too. And, like, he's obsessed with that narrative right there, is talking about just people wearing masks outdoors for a walk. And that's because that's all he's doing outside. It's not like he's going to the store, not going shopping. He's not doing anything else. He's talking about for his walks with Beth that people aren't wearing masks, and it's freaking him out. That's all he fucking talks about. And there are other issues going on out there than not wearing masks in the park.
Yeah.
You know.
So as we're recording this, there's probably the biggest, I don't know what you call it, civil rights movement maybe in the country's history happening.
Like a whole uprising,
and Howard just barely talks about it.
Not at
Still
all.
on the mask.
Literally, like, we went through a week of protest, like some of the most remarkable protests that we've seen in our lifetime. All 50 states, unprecedented. All 50 states involved with these protests. Now, that was something to talk about in itself because that was remarkable. But within those protests, there was obviously some people that took advantage of the situation and were looting and rioting, and that became another issue on top of the protests. And that was a huge issue for days on end.
The president's, like, the way he's been responding, that's another layer.
Right.
So all these,
there's so many layers to what happened.
That everyone else is talking about.
And even just and the umbrella to all of that is what happened to George Floyd and the injustice that happened there. Through all of that, I mean, it was like peppered with, he didn't.
That was like a 5-second.
That was
comment.
a 5-second comment, and then he went right back to people not wearing masks while they jogged outside and bothering him and Beth. And I'm like, man, like, how the fuck is that? Like, I mean, so just to bring me back to, like, what I was saying about being out of touch. That's what I'm talking about. Like, he's just so wrapped up in this little bubble, and the more he stays at home, and the more it's just him, Beth, and the Roomba. It's like it's just
that's our kid.
Yeah, it's just gonna be this bubble that keeps shrinking just between around them, and I just don't think he's. I don't know. That's kind of my thought, and that's kind of my fear for the future of the show if it stays like this.
Yeah, not only that, but he's surrounded himself, with only people that agree with him. Like, if it was back in the day, Artie would be like, Howard, quit being such a pussy.
Right. Yeah, there's... Oh, God.
There's
could you imagine
no contrarians.
Could you imagine Fred saying that?
Oh, my God.
Fred,
it'd be over.
What are you doing? Where's your balls, man?
And not only did they not go against him, but they just agree with, like, as soon as they go on a Zoom call, they're like, I know, Howard, my neighborhood's the same thing. I live in the Bronx, and no one has a mask on.
Like,
and then the caller calls in, and, yeah, Howard, I live in Oklahoma, and no one wears masks. It's like, dude, drop it already.
Like, I wish, like, on. Who like, Ronnie's pretty good. Ronnie will, like, he'll try to comply with what they're thinking, but he'll also be like, yeah, I wasn't wearing a mask. Fuck it. So what? I'm fine.
Yeah, he actually has a backbone still.
He has a backbone. Mehmet, I thought, was going to be like that because he's usually he's super right wing and has his own thoughts, and he usually calls out other staff members for, like, kind of falling in line with what Howard thinks. So I thought when he would come on, he would be like, no, I'm not worried. Like, I've been out and about. I've worn a mask. I haven't worn a mask, but I'm fine. Everything's fine. Howard, you're kind of overreacting for the whole thing. But no, nobody is. It's
or even
crazy.
Even if they don't want to disagree with him, they just start the conversation with agreeing with whatever he was just talking about. It's just kind of obnoxious. Like, even Jason, the guys that have been on the show, I think there's just this. I mean, not like he was ever one to, like, really mix it up with Howard, but I feel like there's just this, like, overarching, like, thought of, like, don't you dare speak out or you're going to be Brent Hatley on the way out.
But it's like, I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that that's the case with, that's like Howard's made it like that around there. Whenever, like, the culture was so not that for so long that all of a sudden everybody's scared to speak their mind. Or does everybody genuinely feel this way?
Maybe. Just maybe not all of a sudden, but Artie. I think Artie leaving was kind of like a line in the sand for the show. I think a lot of things, and not saying that they needed to, I mean, Howard was also facing some tough decisions too. He was dealing with Artie in the height of his drug addictions, and it's tough to keep someone on staff that's so unreliable or just even needed help. I know Howard offered to send him to rehab and things like that, but it's like once he left, you just slowly start to, even Gary and just Fred, Robin even, there's just no opposing views.
The fights between Fred, Robin, Gary, and Howard would be my favorite thing.
Legendary.
Legendary. They're the most fun thing. Whether they're all ganging up on 1 or 2 on 2 or whatever it may be, that was the most fun to listen to. And Jesus, I can't remember the last time Fred spoke his mind as far as up against Howard.
No.
It sucks because I feel absolutely is all I hear from Fred anymore.
So to say, that's the canned response.
Yeah. Fred, what do you think? Absolutely. Robin, is that right? That's right. Okay. Everybody's cool. It's I don't know. It's maybe they do really feel that way, but it's if they don't, that sucks. And for them to feel like they have to kind of just be all right, or they're just tired and old, and they're just you know what, I don't care to mix it up. You know what I mean? Maybe we're just maybe I'm just over it.
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, but we did an episode earlier about the young staff members. At the time, we were kind of complimentary about them, and I'm still kind of complimentary about some, but honestly, they're kind of bitches, dude. You hear these staff conflicts, they record each other.
Dude, Wilding, I used to like him a lot because he came up with a lot of funny bits. He's a little bitch, dude.
That's what I'm saying, dude. They're mostly a bunch of bitches.
I think he recorded people and him getting on. Who did he record? Was it Ronnie? He's the one who recorded.
Well,
Ronnie.
Kind of the basis of what we're talking about is they did a Zoom staff happy hour, and got recorded without most people on the thing knowing, and okay, whatever, you want to do that, it's for a radio show, whatever. But then to go on live, I feel like they're all just waiting for their turn to rat out their friend to the principal or something. They're waiting for their moment in front of Howard to then talk about all the fucked up things that's been going on behind the scenes. But also, I always kind of pictured this Stern show as being an awesome, a dream job to work for. Honestly, it kind of seems pretty catty bitches if you were on the staff right now.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of stabbing each other on the back, recording, then they're fighting on air, but not cool fights, kind of
Right, yeah, it's not interesting.
It's not interesting fights.
Right.
Yeah, it's just how dare you, and I'm not talking to you anymore. And
right, the Rick Fox. What's his name? Mike Fox.
Rick Fox
yeah,
from
Rick
the
Fox.
Lakers.
Yeah, Rick Fox came back. He came out of retirement. But no,
former NBA champion.
Mike Fox and Ronnie. That fight was fucking so stupid. And I don't know. There's nothing interesting to me about those two fighting. I mean, hearing Ronnie get worked up. I mean, okay, if we're talking about Ronnie being interesting itself is a whole other story because his shit story was one for the ages. So,
Yeah.
Whew,
He is a gem.
So, I mean, watching him get worked up is always fun, but the actual content of the argument that they had for Happy Hour, not interesting at all. But yeah, you're right. I just wonder, what the stat, as far as we're talking about the show and what it's going to be if it stays like this for a longer period of time, what that means for the staffers and everybody. You know what I mean? How are they going to handle that? Because a lot of the they have to change their whole.
You have to think there's less material for them to work on.
Right. I was gonna say they're they have to change their mindset completely as far as what they can. They're limited as far as what they can do for comedy bits and for just the writing of the show has
Not
to be
a lot
completely
Man on the Streets,
right?
Bits that were always hilarious. That showed you how dumb people are.
Right. So I mean, like I said, I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt because there's not been a lot of bits. Them as far as just anything funny really that stood out.
You didn't like John Hine playing the guitar?
Oh man, what a fucking riveting segment!
I was in stitches.
What a riveting segment! And credit to Howard, man, because he will give throw a one liner in there that'll get me to crack up during a bit that's not going well or it's not funny at all, and he'll say something and I'm like, all right, like that kind of brought
Let's
me
get
back.
out of this or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like so.
Now that I think about it, he kind of did used to have more of a mind for that. Like he kind of used to bail on bits quicker. Now he kind of seems to just ride it out. Maybe
I
he
don't
just
think
doesn't
there's
have
much else
anything
to
to
go
go
to.
to.
Yeah, there's nothing to go to. It's like, I mean, how much more can he riff?
That's actually
You
true
know?
because the more I think about
Dude-
it, he used to talk about, oh my god, they'd do whole entire episodes about cleaning out the computer because he had so much to work on. And now it's like, eee.
Dude, think about this, and I've called for this in previous podcasts that we've recorded. They need to switch to a 2.5 to 3 hour show max.
Yeah.
Because think about it, dude. Podcasts will do literally 2 hours a week. Howard's doing 12 a week. That's an insane amount of content that he doesn't need to be doing. So we can sit here and analyze all this shit and being like, this sucked, this sucked, this sucked, this worked. But yeah, like if you really boil down everything, if you really did it, like if Howard did as much content as like a normal Joe Rogan or somebody that's doing like a normal podcast, it's a fraction of the amount. So of course we're gonna have to criticize a lot because a lot of it's gonna be shit. So I'm just saying, if he just did, a limited show, maybe just did like, on Tuesday, Monday and Tuesday did 2 hours just bullshit with Robin, did a couple comedy bits, and then Wednesday did like his main interview. Hire me as a fucking producer. I'm going to fix this goddamn show.
Yeah, and we've kind of talked about this, but I mean, Howard's not getting any younger, but we've mentioned this before. Do you see any type of post Stern Show career for him of like a David Letterman Netflix style of just pure interviews, or keeping somewhat content out there without outside of the Stern Show? Or is he just, I would say when he's done, but even he'll take a 2-week vacation. He's like, I was itching to get back on the mic. Like, he wants his voice heard. It's going to be tough for him to just straight cold turkey retire.
Yeah, I think Beth would be running for the hills if it's just him and her, and he doesn't have an outlet to kind of get the stuff out. So, yeah, I do think there'll be something. I don't know what I don't know what it's going to be, because I think David Letterman kind of stole his perfect outlet for post-retirement. Same with Jerry Seinfeld. Well, I don't know, because I remember when Letterman was on, he was like, I'm more jealous of Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. He's like, that's the perfect. It's like, I wish I did that. And I think Howard wants to be like if Jerry did that and Dave did that, Howard needs his own something, and it's going to be something along those lines of interviewing people that's completely in his control, where he can still kind of have his own voice in there too. I don't know what it is, but I do think there'll be something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the end of this year his contract's up, right? So we're in June.
Yeah, so they're done with the studio, man. They're not going. He's not going back to the studio.
Yeah, he's in the Hamptons for good.
Well, shit, man. So
speaking of wrapping up the Stern Show, we should probably wrap up this episode, huh?
Yeah. Anybody still there?
Is this thing on?
Anybody still here?
Is mic working?
I guess that's it.
Yeah, come on back. We'll be talking about some Stern Show shit.
Yeah, we're gonna
do our watch along. We've been talking about this for like a year, but we're gonna do character episodes. We're gonna do like a whole Fred episode, Gary, Robin.
We'll probably stop there.
We don't really need to talk about Howard. He's kind of what we talk about all day anyways.
Let's get deep into Howard.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. We're going to try to be more consistent with these podcasts. I know we've been kind of all over the place. We'll do one, disappear for 4 months, come back and launch 3 in a row. So we'll try to be more consistent. Maybe that'll help out with some followers and some listeners. Maybe we'll stick around a little longer if we do that. So
we got too many. We got too many listeners. We've been flooded. We've had to up our broadband.
We're going to get canceled again if we keep lying to everybody. We got 4 listeners. We're going to try to up that to 8. But no, we're gonna we'll try to be a little more consistent for you. So we'll keep cranking these out, and hopefully you keep coming back.
That's right. Bye for now.
Bye for now. Hey now.
This is Beat.